When we picture a perfectly balanced person, we may imagine someone who is never angry, never frightened, and never carried away by emotion. Someone who can receive terrible news, miss a flight, spill an entire cup of coffee, and respond to each event with the same peaceful nod. It sounds very spiritual. It also sounds mildly suspicious. In session 42.2 of the Law of One, Don offered Ra a similar description. He proposed that a balanced person would remain unemotional, almost like an objective viewer watching a movie, so that positive and negative feelings could pass through without affecting their judgment. Ra responded, "This is an incorrect application of the balancing which we have discussed. The goal is not merely to watch our emotions pass while remaining detached. The deeper goal is to understand the self so thoroughly that the old reaction is no longer needed." Ra continues, "This is not indifference or objectivity, but a finely tuned compassion and love which sees all things as love. That difference will form the heart of this episode. Balance, as Ra describes it, is not the absence of feeling. It is not emotional numbness, forced calmness, or the ability to hide everything behind a pleasant expression. In fact, when Dawn asks what a perfectly balanced entity would feel while being attacked, Ra gives a remarkably brief answer. The response is love. That does not mean the balanced person becomes passive. It does not mean danger must be ignored, harmful behavior permitted, or every difficult situation greeted with a warm hug and perhaps a handwritten thank you card. It means that fear, anger, pain, and desire no longer blind the person to the deeper unity beneath the experience. And reaching that condition requires something very different from simply defeating the parts of ourselves we dislike. Ra tells us that desires should not be overcome, emotions should not be buried. Each experience must be examined, and its opposite discovered within us. Even desires that should not be acted upon can be explored safely within the imagination, understood, and accepted as part of the complete self. We will explore what balance actually means, how Ra's balancing exercise works, why repression can be mistaken for peace, and why spiritual growth does not require us to become less human. It asks us to become more fully human without remaining divided against ourselves. If balance does not mean becoming unemotional, what does it mean? Ra begins with the energy centers, the system commonly described as the chakras. We explore these centers in detail in an earlier episode, so we will not ask the entire metaphysical rainbow to report for another roll call. But a brief return is necessary, because Ra treats the energy centers as the foundation of balancing. In 15.9, Ra describes intelligent energy flowing into both the planet and the individual. Within the individual, the energy moves through several centers, each connected with a different part of our experience. The red ray concerns our physical foundation and survival. Orange ray involves the personal and emotional self. Yellow ray deals with relationships, groups, power, and social identity. Green ray opens into universal love and compassion. Blue ray concerns honest communication and understanding. Indigo ray is associated with worthiness, spiritual work, and the gateway to intelligent infinity. Violet ray is different. It represents the total expression of the mind, body, and spirit as a whole. Ra says, in a balanced individual, each energy center is balanced and functioning brightly and fully. When one of these centers becomes blocked or distorted, the one energy flowing through the system is also distorted. This can appear as fear, difficulty accepting ourselves, attempts to control others, an inability to give or receive love, difficulty communicating honestly, or a deep feeling of unworthiness. But there is an important distinction here. Balance does not mean that every energy center must display exactly the same amount of activity. In session 38.5, when Dawn asks what the energy centers of a perfectly balanced person would look like, Ra replies, "We cannot tell you this, for each balance is perfect and each unique. We do not mean to obscure. Perhaps another way to address your query is this. In the fully potentiated entity, the rays mount one upon the other with equal vibratory brilliance and scintillating sheen until the surrounding color is white. This is what you may call potentiated balance in third density." Ra then describes an individual whose green ray center is exceptionally bright, whose indigo ray is dimmer, and whose blue ray forms at a point of balance between them. From the outside, this configuration might appear uneven, yet Ra says that it can still be understood as being in perfect balance. That tells us something important. Spiritual balance is personal. It is not a standard arrangement in which every chakra must spin at precisely the same speed. There is no universal diagram that every person must reproduce within themselves. Each of us carries a different temperament, history, set of abilities, and collection of lessons. Ra places far more importance on the harmony between our energies than on the maximum activation of any single one. In session 43.8, Ra says, we have many times now spoken about the relative importance of balancing as opposed to the relative unimportance of maximal activation of each energy center. This is easy to overlook. Someone may have enormous compassion, but very little wisdom about how that compassion is used. Another person may possess a powerful will, but use it to control other people. Someone may communicate beautifully while remaining unwilling to examine the motives beneath what they are saying. A bright energy center does not automatically make the entire person balanced. Ra makes this especially clear in session 41.19. Thusly, entities may have extremely brilliant energy centers while being quite unbalanced in their violet ray aspect due to lack of attention paid to the totality of experience of the entity. In other words, one spiritual strength cannot substitute for understanding the whole self. This is why balance is not achieved by treating the chakra system like a cosmic mixing board and pushing every fader to maximum. More power is not always more harmony. Sometimes it is simply more volume. Ra even suggests that a person who appears fragile may be more balanced than someone displaying tremendous spiritual energy or constant service to others. The most fragile entity may be more balanced than one with extreme energy and activity in service to others due to the fastidiousness with which the will is focused upon the use of experience and knowing the self. What matters is how carefully the person has used experience to know and accept the self. The goal is not perfection in the ordinary sense, it is coherence. Our compassion, judgment, desires, fears, bodies, thoughts, and relationships must gradually learn to work together. No single quality is asked to overpower all the others. Ra offers a particularly beautiful description of this in session 54.8. The mind body spirit complex is not a machine, it is rather what you might call a tone poem. A machine is expected to perform the same function on the same way. A tone poem is different. It moves, it changes in intensity. One voice becomes prominent, then recedes as another enters. Its beauty does not come from every instrument playing the same note at equal volume. It comes from relationship. This also explains why balance cannot be judged entirely from someone's outward behavior. Two people may perform the same loving action for very different reasons. One may act from genuine compassion. The other may be seeking approval, avoiding conflict, or attempting to prove personal worth. The action may look identical, the inner arrangement is not. According to Ra, our spontaneous responses to experience reveal that arrangement. They show us which part of the self are working together and which remain in conflict. Those reactions are not failures, they are information. A flash of jealousy, an urge to control, a moment of fear, or an inability to accept kindness can reveal where energy has become distorted. The experience strikes the instrument, and the resulting note tells us whether something requires tuning. This is where balancing truly begins, not by condemning the note, but by listening to it. And as Ra says in 54.16, in the balanced individual, the energies lie waiting for the hand of the Creator to pluck harmony. If the self is an instrument, how do we begin tuning it? Ra's answer begins with silence. In session 5.2, Ra says, the mind must be opened like a door. The key is silence. Within that silence, the seeker begins examining the mind, not merely the thoughts that seem spiritual or admirable, but the complete range of qualities found within it. Ra continues, where you find patience within your mind, you must consciously find the corresponding impatience, and vice versa. Each thought that a being has in its turn an antithesis. This is the basic pattern of the balancing exercise. When we experience patience, we search for the impatience that also exists within us. When we discover fear, we look for courage. When we feel resentment, we find our capacity for forgiveness. When we judge someone, we examine both the judgment and the understanding that could stand opposite it. The purpose is not to replace the unwanted quality with the preferred one. It is to recognize both. That may sound strange. Most systems of self improvement teach us to strengthen our better qualities and eliminate the others. Patience is good, so we should become more patient. Anger is bad, so we should remove anger. Ra's approach is more subtle. The mind contains all things. Therefore, you must discover this completeness within yourself. Imagine that someone arrives 30 minutes late to meet you. You feel irritated. Perhaps you begin constructing a small internal courtroom in which the other person is charged, tried, and convicted before they have even entered the building. Later, during meditation, you recall the experience. You allow the impatience to return, not to indulge it or justify it, but to experience it clearly. You notice what it felt like. You examined the thoughts attached to it. Perhaps the anger was not really about 30 minutes. Perhaps it touched an old feeling of being unimportant, ignored, or disrespected. Then you consciously search for the opposite. You find the patience within yourself. You remember occasions when you were late, when someone extended understanding to you, or when circumstances were more complicated than they first appeared. You allow that patience to become as real within the mind as the original irritation. The goal is not to announce that patience has won. It is to understand that both patience and impatience belong to the range of possibilities contained within you. Ra describes the next step as acceptance. The second mental discipline is acceptance of the completeness within your consciousness. This is where the exercise becomes difficult. We may be willing to admit that we possess kindness, generosity, and courage. It can be less comfortable to accept that we also contain selfishness, cruelty, jealousy, cowardice, or the desire to control. Acceptance does not mean approving of every possible behavior. It does not mean that kindness and cruelty produce the same consequences. It means refusing to build our identity by pretending that certain human possibilities exist only in other people. Quality we cannot acknowledge within ourselves is a quality we cannot fully understand, and what remains hidden can continue influencing us without our awareness. Ra warns against attempting to pick and choose among attributes. When we identify only with the qualities that we admire, we create a role rather than knowing the complete self. We become the patient person who is secretly furious, the generous person who quietly expects repayment, the peaceful person who has simply become skilled at hiding conflict. The role may look balanced from the outside. Internally, one side is still being pushed into darkness. This exercise also extends beyond the self. Ra says that when we observe patience in another person, we should understand that person as containing patience and impatience. When we encounter impatience, we should remember that patience is also present and a possibility. This prevents us from reducing another person to a single moment. The stranger who behaves rudely is not only rudeness. The person we admire is not only virtue. Each contains a complex range of qualities, just as we do. This does not excuse harmful behavior. It simply allows us to respond to a whole being rather than to the one trait currently standing in front of us, usually waving its arms and making itself difficult to overlook. Third density helpfully supplies practice material at a truly industrial rate. But how do we know which experiences require this kind of examination? Ra gives a practical answer in session 42.11. The thoughts of an entity, its feelings or emotions, and least of all its behavior, are the signposts for the teaching, learning of the self by self. Our thoughts and feelings often reveal more than our outward actions. A person may behave politely while experiencing intense anger. Another may perform a generous act while secretly hoping to gain approval. The behavior alone does not reveal the full energetic pattern. This is why Ra recommends reviewing the experiences of the day. Which event continues to bother us? Which compliment are we still replaying? Which criticism produce a reaction far larger than the words seem to deserve? These moments carry a charge. They show us where the instrument has been struck and which note is still ringing. The balancing exercise asks us to return to that note, feel it honestly, and then allow its opposite to arise. This work occurs within the consciousness. It does not require every desire, impulse, or potential behavior to be acted out physically. If the opposite being examined involves violence, manipulation, cruelty, or another action contrary to the law of one, it can remain entirely within the imagination. Understanding an impulse does not require giving it a field test. Third density is complicated enough already. The aim is neither expression without restraint, nor rejection without understanding. It is awareness followed by acceptance. By repeatedly discovering both sides of our reactions, we begin to recognize that the self is larger than any single emotion passing through it. And once the whole pattern can be seen, we no longer have to fight one half of ourselves in order to protect the other. Once we begin accepting the complete self, an obvious question appears. What should we do with the desires we genuinely don't want? Some desires are harmless. Others may be selfish, destructive, or completely inconsistent with the person we hope to become. The usual spiritual response is to conquer them. We attempt to defeat anger, eliminate jealousy, silence fear, and rise above anything we consider unworthy. If a desire continues to appear, we may treat its return as evidence that we have failed. Ra offers a very different approach. In session 18.5, Ra says, the proper role of the entity is in this density to experience all things desired, to then analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love light within them. Nothing shall be overcome. That which is not needed falls away. The wording is unusually direct. Nothing shall be overcome. This does not mean that every desire should be physically acted upon. Ra immediately provides that distinction. We have found it to be inappropriate in the extreme to encourage the overcoming of any desires, except to suggest the imagination rather than the carrying out in the physical plane, as you call it, of those desires not consonant with the law of one. This preserving the primal distortion of free will. Desires that can harm another person, violate their free will, or move against the unity of creation should remain within the imagination. They can still be examined, their emotional force can still be felt, their origin can still be investigated, but they do not need to become actions. This gives us an important distinction. Acceptance is not permission. Understanding anger does not require attacking someone. Accepting the presence of jealousy does not require controlling another person. Recognizing a desire for power does not mean that we should manipulate people to satisfy it. It simply means admitting that the desire exists. If we refuse to acknowledge it, we cannot discover what lies beneath it. A desire for control may conceal fear. Jealousy may reveal insecurity or a fear of abandonment. A constant hunger for approval may point toward a part of the self that does not yet feel worthy without outside confirmation. The surface desire is often carrying information about a deeper imbalance. Conquering the desire may remove its visible expression without addressing its source. We may stop asking for approval while still quietly measuring our worth through the actions of others. We may avoid expressing anger while continuing to hold entire arguments inside of our minds. We may appear detached from material things while taking considerable pride in how detached we have become. The desire has not disappeared, it has simply found better lighting. Ra explains why overcoming can become counterproductive. The reason it is unwise to overcome is that overcoming is an unbalanced action, creating difficulties in balancing in the time space continuum. Overcoming thus creates the further environment for holding onto that which apparently has been overcome. What we forcefully reject can remain energetically active. The effort required to keep it buried may strengthen our attachment to it. Part of the self must remain constantly alert, guarding the door and making certain the unwanted desire does not return. And unwanted desires are remarkably patient tenants. They may wait quietly until we are tired, frightened, lonely, or under pressure. Then they reappear, often with a fake mustache and a slightly different name. Raw's alternative is not indulgence, it is careful analysis. Suppose someone feels a powerful desire to retaliate after being humiliated. The first step is not to act, but neither is the first step to declare the desire unacceptable and force it away. The person can enter meditation and allow the desire to be experienced within the imagination. What does retaliation promise? Justice? Restore dignity? Safety? The feeling of being powerful rather than helpless? The imagined experience allows the emotional pattern to reveal itself without violating another person's free will. The seeker can then search for the antithesis. Alongside the desire to retaliate, there may also be restraint, forgiveness, compassion, or an understanding of the pain that produced the original offense. Both sides are allowed into awareness. From there, the person can choose an outward response consistent with the law of one, not because the anger has been denied, but because it has been seen clearly enough that it no longer has to make the decision. This is how desire gradually becomes refined. Ra does not describe the individual self as something that must be erased before enlightenment can occur. Our worldly experiences provide the material through which understanding develops. Desire moves us toward experience. Experience produces catalyst. Catalyst allows us to discover who we are, what we value, and how we choose to relate to other selves. As these experiences are analyzed, our desires can begin changing naturally. The desire for possession may become appreciation. The desire for approval may become honest connection. The desire for control may become a desire to protect or serve. The original energy is not necessarily destroyed, it becomes understood and redirected. This is very different from forcing ourselves to stop wanting. One process is based upon rejection, the other is based upon knowledge of the self. Ra describes simply ignoring or overcoming a desire as a shortcut. It may appear efficient, but the lesson contained within the desire remains unfinished. True release occurs when the desire has been understood so completely that it no longer has anything new to teach. Then it can fall away. Not because it was defeated, but because it is no longer needed. And Ra closes this teaching with an important reminder. It is, shall we say, a shortcut to simply ignore or overcome any desire. It must instead be understood and accepted. This takes patience and experience, which can be analyzed with care, with compassion for self and for the other self. Balancing then is not a war against the self. It is the patient process through which every part of the self is finally allowed to become known. We have now seen how balancing begins. An experience produces a reaction, the seeker recalls that reaction, discovers its antithesis, and accepts both as parts of the complete self. But where is this process leading? Don attempts to answer that question in session 42.2. His question is long, but the central idea is simple. Perhaps a balanced person still experiences positive and negative emotions, but learns to observe them without being carried away. The feelings pass smoothly through, leaving no lasting emotional coloration. This sounds very close to balance. Ross says it is not quite correct. The exercise of first experiencing feelings and then consciously discovering their antitheses within the being has as its objective not the smooth flow of feelings both positive and negative while remaining unswayed, but rather the objective of becoming unswayed. The distinction is subtle. Don imagines a person who continues to experience the usual emotional reactions, but becomes increasingly skilled at watching them pass. Ra describes an eventual condition in which the old reaction is no longer produced. The seeker does not merely become better at sitting beside the ringing alarm. Through repeated experience, the system learns what is actually a fire and what is only burnt toast. This does not happen by suppressing the alarm. It happens because the lesson that once required the alarm has been understood. Ra explains. The catalyst of experience works in order for the learned teachings of this density to occur. Catalyst is anything that produces an opportunity for growth. An insult may become catalyst for examining anger. Rejection may expose feelings of unworthiness. A frightening situation may reveal how strongly we identify with survival and control. If an experience still produces a charged reaction, even if we are able to observe that reaction calmly, the catalyst is still performing useful work. That is not failure. It simply means that something remains available to be learned. Ra continues. The end result is that the catalyst is no longer needed. Thus, this density is no longer needed. This is not indifference or objectivity, but a finely tuned compassion and love which sees all things as love. This is a remarkably large idea contained within a very short statement. Third density is built around catalyst. We encounter conflict, limitation, and the illusion of separation because these conditions force us to make choices and discover ourselves. When a lesson has been fully integrated, the particular reaction connected to it is no longer necessary. The experience may still occur, but it no longer strikes the same wound. This is the difference between controlling a reaction and no longer requiring it. Ra calls this condition the truer balance. To make the idea more practical, Don offers an analogy in 42.3. Suppose a bull attacks after someone wanders into its pen. The person moves out of the way quickly, but does not feel personally betrayed by the bull. Its behavior is understood as part of its nature. When another human attacks us, however, the response is usually more complicated. We may feel insulted, frightened, humiliated, or furious. We imagine motives, we remember older injuries. We may begin preparing an argument that will finally prove our worth and, ideally, leave the other person staring silently into the middle distance. The physical action may resemble the bull's attack, but the emotional meaning becomes much larger. Don suggests that balance would mean seeing both the bull and the attacking person as the creator, understanding their exercise of free will, and responding without blame. Ross says this is basically correct, but adds an important nuance. The causes behind another person's behavior are usually more complex than those behind the bull's behavior. A human attack may emerge from fear, pain, confusion, conditioning, or an attempt to protect a wounded identity. A balanced person can perceive some of that complexity. This creates additional opportunities for service, but service does not always mean remaining present. Understanding someone's pain does not require volunteering to receive its consequences. The person may leave, set a boundary, refuse a demand, call for help, end a relationship, prevent someone from causing further harm. Recognizing the creator within the bull does not require remaining in the pen for a follow up demonstration. Balance changes the consciousness behind the response. It does not forbid practical action. Don then asks the question directly in 42.4. Would a perfectly balanced entity feel an emotional response when being attacked by the other self? Ra replies, this is correct. The response is love. Not emptiness, not indifference, love. In the following question, Don raises the difficulty of maintaining this response when an attack produces extreme pain or even physical death. Ra answers, this is correct and further is of a major or principal importance in understanding, shall we say, the principle of balance. Balance is not indifference, but rather the observer not blinded by any feelings of separation, but rather fully imbued with love. This may be the clearest description of balance in the entire material. The balanced entity remains an observer, but not a cold or distant one. The person sees clearly because feelings of separation are no longer blocking the view. The attacker is not perceived as something outside creation, separate from the creator, or fundamentally unrelated to the self. The harmful action can still be recognized as harmful, but the being behind it is not reduced to that action. This is not a neutral position between love and hatred. Ra is not describing someone who feels half of each and calls the result balance. The observer is fully imbued with love. On the positive path, balance does not weaken love. It removes the distortions that prevent love from being expressed clearly. That love may be gentle, it may be firm, it may comfort someone, refuse someone, forgive someone, or create distance from someone. Its outward form depends upon the situation. What makes it balanced is the absence of separation within the perception behind it. Ross says that when Catalyst no longer produces the old reaction, the entity becomes a co creator of experiential occurrences. Instead of being consciously pushed into anger, fear, or defense, the person can participate consciously in shaping what the experience becomes. The event no longer writes the response for us. We become capable of answering it. This kind of balance may feel impossibly distant. Ra acknowledges that it takes much practice. The objective is not to imitate the final state before we have reached it. Pretending to feel only love while anger continues beneath the surface does not create balance. The anger must first be experienced, understood, balanced with its opposite, and accepted. Only then can its charge gradually lose its necessity. And this leads to an important problem. From the outside, repression and balance can look almost identical. In both cases, a person may appear calm and choose not to react. Inside, however, they are entirely different conditions. One has understood the emotion, the other has merely hidden it. A person is insulted but remains calm. No raised voice, no angry reply, no visible reaction. Has this person achieved balance? Possibly. They may also spend the next 6 hours replaying the conversation, delivering increasingly devastating responses to an audience that exists entirely inside the shower. Outward calm tells us very little about what is happening within. In session 42.9, Don asks Ra about the difference between someone who represses an emotionally charged reaction and someone who is genuinely balanced. Ra first corrects an assumption within the question. To the truly balanced entity, no situation would be emotionally charged. This does not contradict Ra's earlier statement that the balanced response is love. Love remains. What is absent is the reactive charge created by separation, the feeling that the event has threatened the self, diminished the self, or placed the self against another being. Repression is different. Ra says, the repression of emotions depolarizes the entity insofar as it then chooses not to use the catalytic action of the space time present in a spontaneous manner, thus dimming the energy centers. To depolarize in this context does not mean that one hidden emotion erases all spiritual progress. It means the experience is not being fully used to develop the chosen orientation. The catalyst arrives carrying information, but the information is refused. Perhaps we have learned that anger is unspiritual. We feel it rising, immediately condemn it, and force it out of awareness. We may even replace it with language about forgiveness before we have honestly acknowledged what needs to be forgiven. The anger has not been balanced, it has been covered. A peaceful expression can become another role. The spiritual person who is never upset, never offended, and absolutely does not have a rapidly pulsing vein in the forehead. Ra does not make a detailed technical distinction between repression and suppression in the passages. The central issue is whether the experience is being allowed into conscious awareness so that it can be understood and used. But Ra also recognizes that immediately expressing every emotion is not always wise. If someone insults us, complete spontaneity might involve shouting, throwing something, or presenting a detailed list of the personal shortcomings in chronological order. That may express the emotion, it may not produce much balance. Ra adds, there is, however, some polarization towards positive if the cause of this repression is consideration for the other selves. Holding back a reaction because we do not want to harm another person contains an element of service to others. The anger still requires examination, but choosing not to weaponize it can be a loving decision. Ra then describes an important middle condition. The entity which has worked long enough with the catalyst to be able to feel the catalyst but not find it necessary to express reactions is not yet balanced but suffers no depolarization due to the transparency of its experiential continuum. This person is not pretending that the anger does not exist. They feel it, they recognize it, they allow it to become transparent to conscious examination. but they do not find it necessary to immediately place that anger into the world. This is not yet the final balance described by Ra, because the event still produces a charge. But neither is it unhealthy denial within Ra's framework. The catalyst remains visible and available for later work. We can imagine several responses to the same insult. In the first, the person reacts immediately and unconsciously. Anger takes control, and the other person becomes an enemy. In the second, the person says nothing but insists internally that they are not angry. The reaction is buried, where it continues influencing thoughts, tensions, and later behavior. In the third, the person feels the anger clearly but chooses not to express it destructively. Later, they examine what made the insult so powerful and balance that reaction with its antithesis. In the final condition described by Ra, the insult no longer creates the same emotional charge. The person sees the situation clearly, recognizes the other self behind the behavior, and chooses an appropriate response without being blinded by separation. These responses may appear almost identical from across the room. The difference is found within consciousness. Dawn asks how we can know whether we are truly unswayed or merely repressing what we feel. Ra answers, to the balanced entity, no situation has an emotional charge, but is simply a situation like any other, in which the entity may or may not observe an opportunity to be of service. The closer an entity comes to this attitude, the closer an entity is to balance. The test is not whether we remained polite. It is whether the experience continues carrying a charge. Do we keep replaying it? Do we still need the other person to admit that we were right? Does the body tighten when their name is mentioned? Are we avoiding the situation because we are at peace with it, or because touching it might release everything we have been holding down? These reactions are not reasons for shame. They are evidence that catalysts remain available. The honest answer may simply be, I did not act upon the anger, but I am still angry. That is a far more useful starting point than attempting to convince ourselves that we have already moved beyond it. Ra then gives a direct recommendation. You may note that it is not our recommendation that reactions to catalysts be repressed or suppressed, unless such actions would be a stumbling block not consonant with the law of one to an other self. It is far better to allow the experience to express itself in order that the entity may then make fuller use of this catalyst. Allowing the experience to express itself does not necessarily mean allowing every outward behavior. The emotion can be admitted privately. It can be felt within meditation, spoken about honestly in a safe setting, written down, or explored through imagination. The reaction is permitted to reveal its shape without being permitted to injure someone else. A useful sequence might be simple. Feel the reaction, choose the outward behavior consciously, then return to whatever remains. Over time, the emotional charge may weaken, not because it has been pushed far underground, but because its lesson has been received. Ra does not suggest that this transformation should happen instantly. Thus, the gradual increase in the ability to observe one's reaction and to know the self will bring the self ever closer to a truer balance. Patience is requested and suggested, for the catalyst is intense upon your plane, and its use must be appreciated over a period of consistent learned teaching. Repression attempts to manufacture the appearance of peace before understanding has occurred. Balancing allows understanding to come first. The peace, if it comes, is the result, not the costume. Most balancing work will not occur during moments of perfect stillness. It will begin with the conversation that continues bothering us after it has ended, the criticism we cannot stop replaying, the desire we wish we did not possess, the small event that produced a reaction far larger than the event itself seemed to deserve. In session 64.20, Ra describes these experiences with an unusually familiar image. Each sensation that leaves the aftertaste of meaning upon the mind, that leaves the taste within the memory shall be examined. These are the sensations of which we speak. The experiences that remain with us are the ones carrying material for balancing. We do not need to examine every passing thought, every minor discomfort, or every moment in which the body briefly objected to the chair. We can begin with what lingers. At the end of the day, choose one experience that still carries a charge. Only one. The mind, given sufficient encouragement, will happily place the entire day on trial. Recall the experience as clearly as possible. Where were you? What was said? What did you feel? What did you want to do? Allow the original reaction to return without correcting it, defending it, or attempting to make it sound more spiritual than it was. If you were angry, experience the anger. If you were frightened, acknowledge the fear. If you wanted approval, control, revenge, attention, or escape, allow that desire to become visible. Nothing needs to be physically enacted. Anything harmful can remain safely within the imagination. The purpose is simply to stop hiding the experience from yourself. Then search for its antithesis. Alongside the anger, find the capacity for understanding. Alongside fear, find courage. Alongside the desire to control, find the willingness to release. Alongside rejection of another person, find the part of yourself capable of recognizing that person as the creator. Do not force the opposite to defeat the original reaction. Allow both to exist. The goal is not to finish the meditation as the patient version of yourself and send the impatient version away without dinner. The goal is to discover that both belong to the complete mind, and that the conscious self can understand them without being ruled by either. Then ask what the experience was trying to reveal. Why was this particular event carrying so much weight? Did it touch an old fear? Did it threaten an identity you have been protecting? Did it expose a desire that has not yet been understood? The answer may not arrive immediately. Balance is not produced by finding the correct sentence and repeating it until the emotion becomes cooperative. Some experiences must be revisited many times before their deeper pattern becomes visible. Raw emphasizes this in section 82.3. Each thought and action needs then to be scrutinized for the precise foundation of the distortions of any reactions. This process shall lead to the more central task of acceptance. However, the architrave must be in place before the structure is built. We cannot accept the complete self without first knowing what we are accepting. Broad statements such as, I accept myself or I see everything as love, may express a sincere intention, but the central acceptance Ra describes is built through careful attention to the smaller reactions beneath those statements. The architecture begins with the ordinary moment, a delayed message, an unexpected rejection, a flash of envy, an act of kindness we found strangely difficult to receive. Each one reveals part of the structure, and each time we meet that part without judgment, another piece of the self becomes available for understanding. This is not quick work. Ra repeatedly asks for patience because the catalyst of third density is intense. The aim is not to stop reacting by tomorrow morning. Attempting to force that result would only turn balance into another form of overcoming. For most of us, catalyst is still necessary. That is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that we are still learning. The balanced entity described by Ra may see every situation without emotional charge and respond fully in love. But the path toward that condition begins much closer to where we already are. Noticing the charge, allowing it to speak, discovering its opposite, and accepting what both reveal. Over time, some reactions may begin to soften. A familiar insult no longer reaches the same wound. A desire once fought against is finally understood and quietly falls away. A person once seen only as an enemy becomes more complex within our perception. We may still leave the situation, we may still say no, we may still protect ourselves or another person, but separation no longer makes the decision for us. Balance does not ask us to become indifferent to life. It asks us to meet life so completely that nothing within us must remain hidden from love. Perhaps that is why every experience leaves its own particular aftertaste. It is an invitation to return, to listen again, and to allow one more unresolved note within the self to find its place in the harmony. Thank you for watching or listening. I wish you all love, light, peace, and joy. Take care.